In our last mini lesson, I talked about cohesion and coherence. They're similar words that mean two different things. If you recall, coherence is the flow of a chapter, are the main points building toward an argument. And cohesion, on the other hand, is about the internal logic and structure of paragraphs. And if you recall, coherence and cohesion are all about making the relationships between ideas explicit so that your reader knows how your writing is working together. And making these relationships explicit is how we unpick our Gordian knot as we're writing our dissertations. Today, I'm going to be talking about reading like a reviewer and providing solid feedback for your writing partner. Don't worry if you've already provided feedback for your writing partner. That is just fine. Awesome. But keep these tips in your back pocket for next time or when you're reviewing your own work. We're going to talk about two of the most common issues that come up in scholarly writing today. The first is dissonance. Dissonance happens in writing when parts of the writing lack coherence and or cohesion. And in both cases, the way a reviewer picks this up is through what I call a spidey sense. It's something that as the reader is reviewing the paper, they're feeling that something's a little bit off and something needs a bit more attention. And in this point in your careers, you actually have that spidey sense, whether you realize it or not. It's the amalgamation of all the rules that your teachers taught you in K through 12 about writing, the results of trying to figure out what that instructor in your undergrad meant when they gave you feedback on your writing. It's the hard questions that you had to answer in your writing as you work toward your master's degree. And it's the result of that deep thinking that you're doing about your own writing and the readings that you're looking at in your doctoral program. That's so much of what scholarly work is in your doctoral program. As you're reviewing your work or somebody else's work, when you feel that spidey sense, pay attention to it as you read the manuscript. Now, the next step is figuring out exactly what's making that spidey sense tingle. What is the dissonance that you've picked out? And typically, these are either issues, as I mentioned before, with coherence or cohesion. Issues with coherence typically occur when the author doesn't understand how a main point connects or contributes to the main argument. And I tend to notice this most of the time at this point in your writing, in your theoretical frameworks. It's when the author fully doesn't understand the theoretical framework or why it is useful for their research at this point. And that is totally normal. Theoretical frameworks are based on theory. They're based on something really abstract. And what you're trying to do is use something very abstract and apply it in a very concrete way. Here's how to identify a few of the most common issues with coherence. First, you're not able to pick out the main claims that the author is making. The writer is redundant, saying the same thing in different ways in different places. The same topics might appear in multiple places throughout the manuscript or throughout the introduction as you're reading through that. You can't figure out why a paragraph fits under a heading, or you can't figure out how a series of paragraphs fits together to support a claim. And finally, another thing I tend to see is your writer engages in circular reasoning or other logical fallacies. Now, if you don't remember what all the logical fallacies are that tend to occur in scholarly writing, and frankly, I couldn't name them off the top of my head, I posted a link in our module that goes over some of the most common logical fallacies. And this is from our wonderful friends at the Purdue Writing Lab or the Purdue Online Writing Center called the Purdue OWL. Let's talk a bit about how to identify issues with cohesion. First and foremost, a sentence is hard to read. Second, the author uses the passive voice. Whenever possible, we want to use a direct voice. And that might occur because the sentence has too many clauses in one sentence or too many ideas in one sentence. Cohesion also is an issue if there are too many topics in one paragraph that don't work with each other. Each sentence in a paragraph should contribute to the understanding of the main point of that paragraph. If you are left reading a sentence wondering why it's there, or as my very direct English teacher used to say, so what? That's also an issue with coherence. And logical fallacies can also appear in paragraphs. So make sure you're watching out for those as you're providing feedback to your authors. Another situation that often occurs in early drafts that you should pay attention to is when an author makes an assertion with lack of support and or editorializes. And this happens for a number of reasons as well. First, The author is passionate about their topic, passionate enough to give up a couple years of their lives to conduct a research project and then write a book about it. And they want their readers to understand just how significant and important their topics are and their research is. Another reason that this might happen is that a writer just wants to get the points out and on paper and intends to go back and add that support. In this case, authors have probably read enough literature to be able to generalize it and turn it into their own words, and they just haven't gone back and added the support. If you point it out for them, it might make it easier later on for them to go back and add those references. Here's how to identify when the author is making assertions with lack of support or editorializing. Again, the author is relying on common logical fallacies. The author might use absolutisms. If you don't remember what an absolutism is, saying something is or something isn't, or using extreme language to emphasize a point when emphasis isn't needed. The author might assume that their assertion is common knowledge, but you still have to back that up with research that has been peer reviewed. The same issue occurs if the author is leaning on popular culture or something in the media, again, without going back and checking references to really get at the nuances of that assertion. And this happens quite a bit at this point in our careers because we have so much experience, we have done so much writing, and we've been working, many of us, for a number of years in our own careers. And that's when the writer leans on their own background knowledge or expertise, because many of us are experts in our field at this point. We still, even if we are experts, we still need to go back, ground that expertise in peer-reviewed articles and references. So dissonance and editorializing are typically the two main issues that you should be looking for as you're reviewing your partner's writing and your own writing. Let's talk a little bit about how to give good feedback to the writer as you're reviewing their work. First of all, you're not expected to be their editor. You don't need to check their grammar, fix their spelling, or point out errors in APA at this point. The editors that we have on staff at Edgewood are very good at that. If, however, you see an error that's occurring over and over, you can point that out a couple of times and note that they should continue to watch out for those, or put that in your general comments that you may have and note to the author that they should look out for those reoccurring errors. The second point I want you to know is that every single piece of writing has something good about it. And I've read a lot of your writing, so I know you can all write, and every single piece of your writing is going to have something good about it, probably multiple things good about it. When I give feedback, I like to start my comments by focusing on those positive things. Those are things the author can learn from. Maybe it's a very general comment that you can apply holistically to the whole paper. Maybe you have found that the writer has a couple of really great paragraphs that read super smoothly and are just wonderfully constructed. And the author can go back, reference those, and learn and kind of analyze what they did in those paragraphs. That's a great thing to point out. After that, you can get into the nitty-gritty of your feedback. And depending on what you and your writing partner decide, how you do that is up to you. You may have noticed that, especially if you've given me a longer piece of writing, I tend to use inline comments to point out specific issues or make suggestions. If you've already had Dr. Brown for a class, Dr. Brown will sometimes make videos for her students that point out each of these things. It depends on the editor and the reviewer and what they're most comfortable with. Regardless of how you give comments, the most important thing you can do is that if you see an issue, point it out, even if you don't know how to fix that issue. That might be giving feedback like, this sentence is confusing to read, or I'm not sure how these paragraphs work together, or something like, I'm not sure what the main point of this paragraph is. Maybe you can go back and make your topic sentence more clear. If you're able to name the issue that's going on, that's even better feedback. And that can really help the author figure out what to do next. That feedback may look like, there's a little issue with coherence between these three paragraphs, or there's an issue with cohesion between these sentences. Something like, there might be too many topics in this paragraph, or this sentence is a little choppy and I'm not quite sure what it means. And finally, pointing out when something sounds like an assertion or editorializing. That's very useful for the author. And that's also an issue with cohesion. If you're able to go one more level down in the specifics of giving feedback, it's great if you can offer a suggestion on how to fix the issue. Of course, it's just a suggestion. You don't have to take it to author if you don't agree with your reviewer. That's not a problem. Don't worry if you're not exactly sure what the problem is. A lot of times I'm not exactly sure what the issue is, and I need to go back and actually talk to the author to help them clarify what they're trying to say and help me understand their meaning. However, if you are able to give pointed feedback that is a suggestion on how to fix an issue, that kind of feedback might sound like, this sentence is a little choppy. You might want to try moving these words around like this and then providing an example. You might say something like, you need to mention this earlier in the introduction. Consider adding it to paragraph X and then showing the author exactly where you think it should go. You might say something like, this paragraph might actually need to be under a different heading. Consider moving it to spot X in the paper. Another comment might be, you need to tie this paragraph back to the introductory paragraph somehow. Or something like, you need to define this concept. Or even, you need to go further explaining why this is important to pay attention to. Or back to what Mrs. Spangler used to say, so what? Regardless, know that any feedback that you give and are able to provide is a gift to your author. The reviewer is taking the time to examine not only your writing, but the structure of your writing. And that takes a lot of time. Additionally, as a reviewer, make note of the things that your writing partner does that you like. Perhaps it's phrasing, or a way that your partner has organized an explanation. In fact, that's something that you should do as you read your literature as well. Not just look at what the author is saying, but how they're saying it. I'm looking forward to providing feedback on the drafts that you send in to me. And I hope that you enjoy providing feedback to your writing partner as well. It's always fun to read somebody else's work. And as always, if you're getting tied up in your Gordian knots, reach out. We can probably figure out what you need to do just by talking it through. Otherwise, have a great week. And I look forward to seeing the feedback, the types of feedback that you've been giving your writing partner.